Right. So let's go back to basics and just to reevaluate where we are, and how we're going to look at inclusion in the workplace, how we're going to make those policies, procedures come alive, as Amit was actually saying. Do use your data. Do not shy away from gathering your data. And it's something that I do regularly in ACAS. And I like to look at the whole of the employee life cycle. So looking at the representation, obviously, of the organization, that's fairly straightforward. The snapshot of where we are at any given time. But then look at those certain areas like recruitment. This is something that I'm asking the questions in our HR department. The number of applicants shortlisted, interviewed, and successful. I mean, looking at our data, we're attracting disabled people. The shortlisting, they're getting through the sift. Fine, that's fine. But are they successful at interview? Now, we've had not so many as I would expect to be successful in interview, asking the question, well, why is that? Yeah, we're making adjustments. Does anybody go back to that individual and say, did those adjustments we made work for you? We're not saying, did you get the job? That's not what it's about. Did they work for you enough for you to give your best during that process? So really scrutinizing that data. The casework, we call this grievances, disciplinary action, etc. Having a look at that. Do you have any conciliation in process, any employment tribunals, any personal injuries claims? Actually, look further than the data. You may well only collect perhaps formal grievances. But what about those informal ones? And this is where, I sort of say to our team, okay, we need to look at that the informal data as well. But as well as that, look at our fair treatment contacts out in the field. Let's ask them what's going on. Let's ask them the sort of conversations that they're having with people, the things that people are actually coming to them with. Let's look at training. Not only who's being trained, but who's asked for training as well. Leavers, obviously, and the reason why they're leaving, and of course, our staff surveys. And looking at bias-free policies and practices, I have to say, Amit actually said something that really rings true with me, is making those policies and procedures come alive. And it's work that I've been doing for many, many years. And I have to say, there's not one employer where I haven't said, you could do more here. To make that policy or procedure come alive, you have to have actions around that. And if you actually get a friend, a critical friend, to actually work through your policies and actually say, well, that's a great statement, but how do you make sure it happens? And how do you make sure that happens regularly? It's really not physically, but really ripping it apart and asking sometimes those questions that you don't want to hear, but you know you have to hear. And particularly in the public sector, where you can actually inherit a policy. And a process very much in the public sector. But look behind that. Don't just put it in place. Really look behind it and make it work for you. So creating a sense of belonging and looking at engagement are very much go hand in hand. And I'm going to expand on that in a moment. Train on bias. Absolutely. I know there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of feeling about training on bias, but if it's done properly and done in a way that individuals self-reflect on the kind of assumptions that they're jumping to, it can be done. So don't just jump on the bandwagon saying it doesn't work, because it can do if it's done properly. Creating a vision from the top. Now, very often when I went up to different companies, they would have this lovely, fluffy vision. But when I asked them, well, what do the individuals feel about this? Do they actually understand it? Do they know what areas of work it actually looks at? Do they know what it means? And in every case, when I asked, they didn't. And what had happened, the senior management team had got this lovely, fluffy vision together, but had not actually incorporated the vision or engaged with the staff to actually put that vision together. So promoting open discussion, obviously, ensuring responsibilities and accountabilities, fairly straightforward, and always have those actions linked to the policy. And a clear evaluation process. How often is it going to be evaluated? What's going to bring forward an evaluation? What's going to mean that you evaluate that earlier? And how it affects individuals.